Hi guys, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and welcome back to the channel. Today, once again, we're in our last battle from Norway, entitled Colots de Combat. And here's the news, and there is a lot of it. Ultimately, Narvik is surrounded by the Allied fleet. The Germans are being pressed on all sides, and the amount of damage that is basically listing in the waterways. Ships, merchantmen sunk. We've got basically the town itself is in ruins, the people displaced. It's a terrible catastrophe down there. The Germans are very unsure of the situation themselves and are somewhat nervous around Narvik itself. They know they're effectively under siege, as constant Allied aircraft attacks both the shipping and of course the old lady herself, constantly shelling and taking out any destroyers and ships they have. So whilst in Oslo they parade their new tanks, so to speak, in the lowland countries tanks are actually moving. Well, let's get straight into looking at the forces today. Basically what we have is a French Alpine company which is confident veteran of 2 large platoons. They've stripped a couple of bases off to make a patrol group which we allow in Afton Panzer, and these are recon forces. They also have machine guns and mortars, and I believe they also have off-table artillery support as well as a firestorm unit. In addition to this, they're going to be supported, but they have another firestorm unit which is some tanks as well, as seen in this picture here. The British, which support these confident vets, are also confident vets themselves, because these are the British Guards. The British Guards have seen action before but done very little. They're unflappable, but they have the arch nemesis of the British Army, Major MacDonald, with them. He can call in artillery as a general's poodle, but it's very difficult, and I think they're relying on the tanks very much to support their assaults. Meanwhile, the Germans, well, that's the Kriegsmarine, fearless trained, 2 big platoons with machine guns, mortars, 2 75mm guns, and they've got a small scout section as well. But they are supported also by paratroopers, the Fallschirmjäger, just 1 platoon, a firestorm platoon of engineers. Let's look at the mission. Well, the table, as you can see here, is well deployed. On the left flank of this is a very large mountain, but in the centre, with their captured tank from the last battle, Butte Panzer, they're trying to make their stand because they believe that's where the tanks are going to make an assault. And this is a straightforward assault with 2 objectives being placed. One was placed in the mountains by the French, and the other down in the valley with the main road leading to Narvik. As you can see, they're dug in depth, but that mountain basically means only mountaineers can really operate in it. Well, let's get into the battle action. It's 9 turns. It's a short and sweet game. Weather is rolled. There are no adverse effects. Immediately, the tanks move up, supported by the 1st British Guards platoon. In the centre, basically behind them, as can be seen in this photograph coming up, the 2nd Guards platoon is there with the anti-tank guns and Major MacDonald. But the main emphasis of the attack are all the mountaineers have moved forward with their patrol group on the left flank so they can spot for artillery. As Major MacDonald manages to get through to headquarters, so they have artillery online, the mountaineers, or the cockerels, le coquettes I think they're called, basically move up. They spot with their artillery, ranging in with the patrol group, even with a +1, and pin the Wehrmacht troops on the hill. At the same point, MacDonald calls the artillery down on the tank, predominantly because he's fearful they'll come for him. The anti-tank gunfire is ineffective. But what we've got is the cockerels move straight forward, basically, advancing aggressively. They come under an ambush, take some fire, and then a ground attack, basically, by the Me-110. They've taken a lot of casualties, even from defensive fire, but they get in, and being veterans, basically manage to defeat the Wehrmacht infantry, who ultimately were basically driven in and broken. Although artillery is all over this ridge, the mountaineers have taken a lot of casualties. When they launch another assault, this time the tanks supported by British infantry, the tanks race it However, the Fallschirmjäger were behind them, ready for such an eventuality and within counter-attacking range. The tanks basically destroy a couple of Kriegsmarine bases, only to find their lead tank suddenly attacked by Fallschirmjäger pioneers. Incidentally, these were the troops at Eben am Eel, and effectively they basically knock out that tank, which drives the other two back, and now it's a battle between the guards with their bayonets and the Fallschirmjäger with their explosives and small arms. And that battle rages for 2 to 3 turns. There are a lot of misses in this action, but ultimately the British guards fail, even with their re-roll motivation, and fall back. Meanwhile, the Kampfgruppe that had ambushed, which was 2 heavy machine guns, basically is now attacked again by the 2nd platoon. The Mountaineers basically again are successful. The Germans are forced to fall back off the objective. The Kriegsmarine now desperately were just not close enough to basically support such an attack, and now try and get across, as the rest of the German forces are sort of transfixed in the centre, apart from the Bugpanzer, which leaps forward, hoping to gun down the guards. But the cockerels reach that objective and start opening fire on the Kriegsmarine. Supported by artillery and all of that, they manage to pin down the Kriegsmarine, who are unable to reach the objective. So we have a golden moment, gentlemen, as for the first time we see an Allied victory on land. And I think it was worth waiting for, because even though the campaign is theoretically lost, it's done what history dictated, and obviously Narvik was to fall. There were very heavy casualties in this campaign so far, from both the land, sea and the air. But ultimately what transpired next was even more interesting. Obviously, basically the British and the French, even though they've captured all these Germans, they've taken Narvik, are ordered to abandon it. And after a day of blowing everything up, they then get back on the ships, because there's been the invasion in the lowlands, and head out, leaving Narvik to an amazed German army who then reoccupied it. But in these type of battles, we're always left with the sort of the strange and the bizarre. I mean, what was it all for? I mean, they've blown up Narvik. Was it really going to stop the oil production? And there is some argument that may not have been the case, because when the French ultimately lost France, sufficient oil was available there. So the whole thing seems to be a bit of a contradiction, with men moving, landing, attacking, and then having to disembark. So there was a huge amount of frustration. So as the British get back on the boats, we've got the incredulous Germans just standing there. Obviously all the prisoners were released, including those from the Donbass, and we're left with a rather puzzling sort of end game. So it went to history. Campaign-wise, the Germans did far better than they should have. But, ultimately I have to thank all the players that are involved in this. There's a photo of us there in a rather intense moment in this battle. And as we move forward, let us not forget the sacrifice that was made at Narvik. I mean, we should remember, and those memories continue in commemoration. And as we go into the next, which is a huge stage where we'll be seeing the whole Blitzkrieg operation, hopefully what we can replicate where possible, including Eben am Eel and all the battles in Belgium and Holland. I think we need to refresh how important these campaigns and battles were. And as Nolan produces Dunkirk, I recommend everyone goes there to take a look at the early war and the history behind it. So I hope you'll stay with us. I hope you'll enjoy it. And, there's a hell of a lot coming up in Blitzkrieg. So it's over and out from me. A fantastic campaign for us to make. Hard work. But we've really enjoyed it. And we hope you as the viewers have too. So stay tuned. We're going to have some fantastic stuff coming up. Well worth waiting for. And in the meantime, can I wish you happy wargaming? And it's over and out from me. Bye for now.